My best friend Xavier always wanted to be on deaf poetry. Always thought that only the best could make it up on that stage, so he thought that if he could conceive of a poem good enough to get him a call back to that show, then he would be a good poet. But you see, Xavier's a little bit insecure, though. You see, he doesn't really realize how good his poetry truly is, but Xavier is more like a magician. And his hands, well, they do all the talking for him. This is a hearing aid. You put it in your ear so you can hear sound. You can hear all the magical little ponies trotting along on rainbows. Now wouldn't that be wonderful? As I think back to the people who deserve this magical piece of plastic, it is Beethoven who deserves it most. Imagine a little boy living in a house where mercy had to be earned by each perfect note. That little boy held more passion in his heart than the angels above him. That little boy was just hard of hearing. What? I'm sorry, I can't hear. I'm deaf. Oh, again, I do the same thing. I read lip alcohol. You know, it's people like you who make me know the prayer. I don't use no A, F, L. I don't use no E, F, L. I use me, F, L. Now listen up. I have a lot to say. There are 32 million children and 328 million adults with hearing impairment, and these numbers are increasing daily. When the deaf cannot hear us, it makes it difficult to communicate with them, just bridging a gap between the deaf and the hearing even further. We need to realize that the deaf people and culture do have a voice. And for us hearing, well, maybe we need to listen a little bit harder. Through the poems Deaf Poet by AMJ, Beethoven by Shane Croizet, Depression by Rage Almighty, Hearing Aids, and Screw You Sign Language by Bill Waters, we can see how expressions can speak louder than words. Beethoven's Last Symphony, a program. You see, his hands were like a closed book cover, inching to be cracked open by someone, to be heard by someone. Xavier had stardust under his fingernails, just waiting to be floated into someone's ears. Quietly, he would practically mold dust into the most beautiful of fairy tales anyone has ever seen or heard, because silence is so dependable on the one that's listening to it. I just wish he knew how good his poetry was. What? A hard hearing. I said, screw you, sign language. I know you're not a person, but you have hurt me more than ever. Do you know when you want something? When you want something so badly, and you're reaching for it, and you're reaching for it, and it's right at your tip, and you try and grab it, and then you get a mouthful of water. And that water, it just sounds like this. Oh, you're deaf. Oh, God. That must be really hard for you. Of course it is. I want to sound like you, but I just can't. Hearing aids. Well, they listen. And Beethoven's father, he made it a habit out of hitting Beethoven. Every time he put finger to ivory, Beethoven heard his father's anthems. And it was not good enough, so he played it slowly. Not good enough, so he played it quickly. Not good enough, so he played until his fingers were gnarled into roots, and then he looked up to the sky. And he saw the angels. But that still was not good enough. But Xavier just wanted us to see the stories that he will never be able to hear again. puppet master conducting a silent show. Xavier will never know how good his poetry truly is because he went deaf at the age of 12. Hearing aids. You put them in your ear so you can hear sound. You can hear yourself breathing for the first time. Now, wouldn't that be wonderful? Hearing your own breath. Beethoven, a musician without his most precious tool, his ear. Drums couldn't hear the people in the front row clapping for him. He couldn't hear the women in the front row whispering Beethoven as they let his music invade their bodies like an armada of Beethoven. Well, he was an addiction like no other. Xavier was in a cap gun incident at the time. You see, his best friends must have thought it was funny to shoot a cap gun directly in Xavier's face and it came to cops and robbers. Well, you know that crime wasn't really not worth that punishment, but that was the last sound that Xavier had ever heard. Can you imagine what it's like, not being able to hear your own last words? But he still stands up on those stages and spit the most beautiful poetry anyone has ever seen or heard, because silence is so dependable on the one that's listening to it. And he never forgets to stand up, and I never forget to clap as loud as I can, so he knows how good his poetry truly is. Oh, what? Oh, I'm sorry, but you keep me so distant from everyone else. I feel like the biggest clown in the smallest darkness. I feel so distant from everyone else. You know, I go into my bathroom late at night and I turn off the lights so I don't have to see my own reflection. But you know, I think in my head that I want to sound like you. I want to be like you. I want to hear when my mother cries at night. I want to talk like you, but you won't understand unless you lose your hearing. And when you do, you can come and shine to me. Hearing aids. And kings and queens, they came to see Beethoven. And it was not good enough, so he played his symphony slowly. Not good enough, so he played them quickly. Not good enough, so he played until the peoples in the stands mocked the man who wrote the symphonies. They flailed their arms in a silent manner. That was perfect. Because the deaf have an intimacy with silence. It comes natural to them. But what if Beethoven did have a hearing aid? Now that is a question. But I will never be able to be like you. I am content with who I am. My best friend, Xavier, is made for those who cannot hear sound. Can you imagine what it's like not being able to hear your own last words? And all Beethoven wanted us to do was just listen for once in our lives. I don't want to hear. I am content with who I am. And the last sound that Xavier had ever heard was